When Claire moved into her new apartment, she thought she was starting over. But mirrors never forget, and some homes never truly let go. In this final chapter of The House Remembers Everything, the terrifying truth behind the reflections is revealed. Step into the shadows of memory where the forgotten scream through shattered glass, and the house is never really empty. The keys jingled like tiny bells of warning in her hand as Claire stepped into the apartment for the first time. The door clicked shut behind her with an unsettling finality. The silence inside was heavy, as if the walls had been holding their breath, waiting for someone to return. The air smelled faintly of old plaster and cleaning solution, like an attempt to cover up something long forgotten. Her boots echoed across the wooden floor, each step too loud, too lonely. Boxes lay stacked in the living room corner, but Claire's eyes were already drawn to the hallway at the back, where the bathroom waited. It was the only room she hadn't seen in detail during the rushed tour with the landlord, Mr. Holbrook. He had brushed past it quickly, saying something vague about renovations and leaving the light off. Claire hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, something about that blank space at the end of the hall made her stomach tighten. She walked toward it slowly, fingertips brushing the cool plaster of the narrow corridor. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, creaking open with a gentle nudge. Inside was a sterile, too clean space. The tiles were spotless, the air unnaturally still. The sink, the toilet, the bathtub, all in perfect alignment. But what struck her was the wall above the sink. There was no mirror, just a pale, bare wall. No markings, no hooks, not even the faint outline of a previous frame. It was as though no mirror had ever existed there. Claire tilted her head. A bathroom with no mirror felt wrong. It was like a face without eyes. A sudden knock echoed through the space. Sharp, metallic, not from the door, but from within the apartment itself. She turned around fast, heart thudding, but saw nothing, just the corridor stretching empty behind her. "Pipes," she muttered. "Old building." But the sound had been too deliberate, like knuckles against glass. Shaking it off, Claire returned to the bathroom and opened one of the moving boxes. She had brought a small mirror, nothing fancy, just something to get by. She held it up against the wall above the sink, trying to imagine the right spot. The tiles behind her caught the overhead light, giving everything a sharp, sterile gleam. She took out some adhesive hooks and pressed the mirror into place. When she stepped back, it hung slightly crooked, but it was good enough for now. Claire stared at her reflection. Her face looked pale under the white light, eyes ringed with the exhaustion of weeks spent packing, signing papers, and driving across states. She reached up to adjust her hair, then froze. In the mirror, behind her shoulder, stood a child, a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with messy dark hair and eyes too wide, too still. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the back of her head. Claire spun around. Nothing, just the empty bathroom. Her heart pounded in her chest. She stared at the space where the boy had stood. Tiled wall, beige towel rack, nothing else. Slowly, she turned back to the mirror. The boy was gone. Claire let out a shaky breath, pressing her fingers to her temples. "You're tired, that's all." The sound came again. Not a knock this time, but a soft, dragging noise, like something being pulled slowly across the floor, or a bare foot sliding over tile. It was coming from the mirror. She looked again, now almost afraid to see her own reflection. The bathroom behind her looked the same, still, silent, sterile. But there was a smudge on the glass now, a faint, greasy outline, like a palm print pressed from the inside. She stepped closer. The print was small, child-sized, 5 fingers, slightly splayed, fogging the surface. Claire wiped it away with her sleeve, hand trembling. The mirror smeared, then cleared. Nothing behind her. She backed away and left the bathroom, flicking off the light. The hallway looked darker than before, somehow tighter. The shadows hung thicker along the edges. Her ears picked up faint sounds now, creaks, distant whispers, almost too quiet to understand. She slammed the bathroom door shut and leaned against it. "Get a grip, Claire." She forced herself to unpack the kitchen box, trying to distract her thoughts. As she pulled out dishes and lined them on the shelf, the overhead light flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. She glanced at the hallway. The bathroom door was open. Only a few inches, but it was open. She knew she had closed it. Claire walked toward it slowly. Her footsteps were quieter now, cautious. The apartment seemed to listen with her, every surface holding its breath. As she neared the door, she could hear something faint from within. Water dripping, though she hadn't turned on the faucet. She pushed the door wide open. The tap was dry, the sink empty. But the mirror was wrong. Her reflection was there, yes, but the room behind her in the glass wasn't her bathroom anymore. It was darker, decayed. The tiles cracked, the walls covered in mildew, the bathtub rusted over, and in the shadows, she saw them. Not just the boy, a woman, tall and thin, hair hanging over one side of her face, stood to the left. A man in a tattered sweater loomed behind her. Their eyes, all of them, fixed on Claire. She turned around. Again, nothing. Her bathroom was clean, intact, untouched. She looked back at the mirror. The family was still there, staring. The boy's lips moved. Claire leaned closer, heart hammering in her ears. She couldn't hear him, but she could read the words. "Don't take it down." Then all at once, the light bulb above her exploded with a sharp pop, showering her with tiny glass shards. She screamed, stumbling out into the hall, grabbing her arm where a thin line of blood now trickled. Her breath came fast and ragged. The bathroom behind her now lay in total darkness, a cold draft slipping out from within. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the apartment silent around her, but not quiet. Every now and then she would hear it, the faint scrape of a finger against glass, a whisper from the hallway that stopped just as she turned her head, and always, always, the sensation that someone was watching her from behind, from just past the mirror. Claire woke to silence so thick it felt like a weight pressed against her chest. The apartment was still dark, a shade darker than it should have been. Even though dawn should have crept in through the blinds, the windows let in no light. The digital clock on the side table blinked 3 a.m. in static red numbers, frozen, unmoving. Her mouth was dry, and the air smelled different. No longer the sterile scent of old paint and wood polish. Now it carried something sour, metallic, and faintly wet. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. There was a sound. It came from the bathroom. Claire's eyes locked on the hallway. The door was shut. She remembered closing it after the light shattered. Yet the sound came through, muffled but rhythmic. She stood, every bone in her body tight with hesitation. The hardwood floor was cold against her bare feet, and each step toward the bathroom felt longer than the last. Tap, tap. She paused just outside the door. Her hand reached for the knob, fingers trembling. The tapping stopped. Her breath caught. The stillness that followed wasn't peace. It was a silence that watched. Claire turned the knob slowly. The door creaked open. Darkness. She fumbled for the light switch with her left hand, careful not to step in. The light blinked twice, then buzzed to life, casting pale illumination across the room. The mirror was still there, hanging askew. The smudge from the previous night was gone. But something was different. The floor tiles beneath the sink were damp. She stepped in, crouching to examine the moisture. It hadn't rained. The plumbing had made no noise. Then she saw it. A tiny handprint on the lower corner of the mirror, much lower than where her reflection would reach. She reached out, fingers hovering over it. Then noticed her own reflection was not moving in time with her. Claire froze. In the glass, she saw herself, but her reflection stood perfectly still. No breath, no twitch, no blinking. Then it smiled. Not a full grin, just the barest twitch of the lips, as if the reflection was mocking her for being too slow to notice. She stumbled backward, knocking over the soap dish with a loud clatter. The sound echoed unnaturally long in the small space, reverberating, as if the walls themselves were trying to mimic it. Her eyes never left the mirror. The reflection remained still, smiling, then blinked. Claire ran. She slammed the bathroom door shut, heart hammering like a fist against her ribs. Her vision blurred with panic, breath shallow, chest tight. She grabbed her phone from the couch. The screen was black. She tried to power it on. Nothing. Not even the battery symbol. Just a dead screen. A scratching sound rose from the hallway, light but rapid, like nails on wood. She spun around, eyes wide, and stared into the dim corridor. The scratching stopped, then started again. Closer. The sound came from behind the bathroom door. Claire backed into the living room, grabbing the nearest object. A brass candlestick holder she picked up at a flea market. She held it up like a bat, arms shaking. The door creaked open. No one stepped out. The light inside the bathroom had gone out again. Claire inched forward and peeked inside. Empty, still, but the mirror was cracked now. A thin web of fractures ran across its surface like veins under pale skin. She turned away, forcing herself to think, to breathe. Maybe she was hallucinating. Maybe the stress of the move, the loneliness, the change. Maybe it was catching up. But deep down, Claire knew it wasn't her mind. Something was in this apartment. Something wrong. Later that morning, once the sun had finally risen, though still weak, like light filtered through fog, Claire returned to the bathroom. She brought a towel to wipe away the dampness and a screwdriver to remove the mirror entirely. She didn't care what it looked like. She just wanted it gone. She stood on her toes, loosening the hooks. The mirror creaked as she shifted its weight. It felt heavier than it should, as if resisting her. With a grunt, she pulled it from the wall and froze. Behind the mirror was no plain wall. There was another mirror, built into the surface, seamless, cold. It had no frame, no border. Just a flat, perfectly smooth pane. She reached out and touched it. It was warm, too warm, and it reflected nothing. No Claire, no bathroom, just darkness. A thick, endless blackness. Then movement, a shape in the void. A woman's face, long and pale, drifting closer. Mouth agape, eyes bloodshot and brimming with grief. Her lips moved slowly. Claire pressed her ear closer, unable to look away. The woman whispered, "Help us." Claire stumbled back, the mirror still in her hands. Her foot caught the edge of the tub, and she tumbled to the floor, the mirror shattering beside her with a deafening crash. Shards flew in every direction, some slicing through the towel, some embedding themselves in her skin. She cried out, clenching her bleeding hand. As she crawled out of the room, a cold gust swept past her, a wind from nowhere, howling faintly, carrying with it distant voices, crying, pleading, some laughing in that hollow, broken way children sometimes do when playing in the dark. She slammed the bathroom door shut again, this time wedging a chair against the knob. She bandaged her hand with what little she had, and then she sat, trembling on the kitchen floor, staring at the hallway. The mirror behind the mirror had been waiting. And now it had seen her. Claire didn't leave the apartment that morning. She sat cross-legged in the living room, her back pressed against the cold wall, watching the hallway with bloodshot eyes. The silence was unbearable. Not peaceful, not calming. It was expectant, like a breath being held just beneath the floorboards. Every tick of the old clock in the kitchen sounded like a countdown. Her injured hand throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage. Blood had seeped through the gauze during the night, and now her fingertips were stiff with dried red crust. She didn't move. She didn't want to risk drawing their attention, because she was sure now she wasn't alone. At 11:06 a.m., her phone turned itself on. It lit up with a pale glow and a soft chime, as if nothing had ever been wrong. She scrambled to it, the screen cold against her hand. No missed calls, no new messages. Just the time, the date, and a strange app she didn't remember installing. It had no name, just a black icon, perfectly round, like a tiny void. Her thumb hovered over it. Then, against every warning voice in her head, she tapped it. The screen went black. For a long second, nothing happened. Then a video started playing. The footage was grainy, like it had been filmed with an old security camera. The angle was high, from a ceiling corner. It showed a room, her bathroom, but not as it looked now. The tiles were cracked. Mold bloomed like bruises across the ceiling. The mirror, the one she had discovered behind the cheap one she had hung, filled the center of the shot. And standing in front of it was a woman, not Claire. She was older. Her back was to the camera, hair tangled, shoulders hunched. She stood still for a long time. Then Her hand reached toward the mirror and passed through it. The footage ended. Claire dropped the phone. A sharp knock came from the bathroom. 3 times, knuckles on tile. Deliberate. Waiting. She stepped toward the hallway, heartbeat loud in her ears. The air thickened with each step. Her feet felt heavy, like she was moving through water. The bathroom door was still blocked by the chair she had wedged there the night before. She waited. Nothing. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. Not a whisper. A child's voice. Clear. Soft. Just a few inches from the crack in the door. "Are you going to help us now?" Claire staggered back, her legs nearly giving way beneath her. She didn't answer. Couldn't. The hallway light flickered, then went out completely. She ran to the kitchen, fumbling for the flashlight she had packed in one of the drawers. When she found it, she flicked it on and swung the beam toward the hallway. The light cut a narrow path through the dark. The bathroom door was open. The chair lay flat on the floor, split at one leg, like it had been kicked or thrown aside. She didn't want to go closer. Every instinct screamed at her to leave. But something else, something deeper, pulled her forward. She stepped into the hallway. The mirror inside the bathroom had changed again. This time, it showed a living room. Not hers. The walls were a sickly green, the floor carpeted in faded orange. A coffee table sat askew, and on the couch sat a family of 4. The boy from before, the man and woman, and a baby swaddled in gray cloth, asleep in the mother's arms. They didn't move. They stared at her, blank-eyed, as if waiting for her to speak first. Claire's voice cracked. Who are you?" The man's head tilted slowly, almost brokenly. The woman raised her hand and pointed at Claire. The boy opened his mouth. His voice didn't match his small frame. It was hoarse, strained, old. "You brought the mirror back." She stepped back, breath caught in her throat. Her flashlight flickered. The reflection changed again. This time it showed Claire. Not as she was now, but sleeping. Curled up on the couch, blanket around her shoulders, mouth slightly open. She looked peaceful, until a shape crept into the frame behind her. A figure. Thin, pale, crawling low across the floor like a spider on brittle limbs. The reflection Claire stirred, then stilled, as if someone had touched the back of her neck. The image blurred, then shattered. The mirror cracked violently from the inside. Claire stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. A gust of icy wind rushed past her, carrying the smell of mildew and something foul, something rotting. The door slammed shut in her face, throwing her hair back with the force. From behind the door, a chorus of whispers rose. Not in English, not in any language she knew. They bled together like radio static and sobs. Claire screamed and backed away, turning on every light in the apartment. But they flickered and dimmed, unable to hold the darkness at bay. She called the landlord. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She left a message, frantic, barely coherent. Then she grabbed her coat, her keys, and made it as far as the hallway outside her apartment before stopping. Everything outside was quiet, too quiet. No sounds from neighbors, no passing cars. Even the city hum she'd grown used to over the years had disappeared. She descended the stairs 2 at a time and pulled open the front door to the street. It was empty. The world was wrapped in a thick, gray fog. Not mist, fog. The buildings across the street were gone. The trees were gone. The sky above was blank. No sun, no clouds. Just an endless gray ceiling. And the street beneath her feet cracked as if it hadn't been touched in decades. A sound came from behind her. She turned. In the window of her apartment, on the 3rd floor, someone stood watching her. Not herself, the boy. He lifted one hand and waved. Claire didn't remember going back inside. One moment she stood beneath that lifeless sky, watching the boy wave from her window. The next, she was sitting on the floor of her apartment, soaked in sweat, her coat crumpled beside her, hands clenched into tight fists against her knees. The front door was shut. Her keys were on the table, and the fog outside the window had disappeared like a dream that forgot itself. The world had returned, or something like it. She crawled to the kitchen sink, turned on the tap, and drank straight from the stream. The water tasted strange, faintly metallic, like it had been filtered through rusted pipes. She didn't care. Her throat burned with thirst and fear. Her phone buzzed. It was on the counter. The black icon was gone now, replaced by the standard home screen. A new voicemail blinked at her. From Mr. Holbrook. She hesitated, then tapped play. Miss Arden, apologies for the delay. You said something about the mirror? I'm not sure what you meant. That unit shouldn't have any original fixtures left. Everything was gutted when the last tenant left. In fact, he paused. In fact, that apartment shouldn't have any mirrors at all, not after what happened. A click. The message ended. Claire stared at the screen. What happened? She whispered, her voice hoarse. But of course, there was no answer. The apartment was quiet again, until the mirror in the bathroom began to hum. It was low at first, like the distant buzz of faulty electricity. Then it deepened into something worse, something that scraped against the edge of hearing. It felt like her skull was vibrating. She moved toward the hallway, flashlight in hand, even though the lights were working now. The door to the bathroom was wide open, inviting. The mirror looked normal at first, just a surface. Cracked, yes, but no worse than yesterday. Then the humming shifted. It became voices, not speaking. Chanting, she stepped inside. The light bulb flickered, then steadied. She stared at the mirror and saw a new reflection. It wasn't her. Not this time. It was the woman from the video, but closer now. Her eyes wide, skin paper thin and bruised with old grief. Her lips moved. No sound came from the mirror itself, but the words echoed in the bathroom. Do you see us now? Claire took a step forward. The reflection widened. She saw the woman standing in a room that looked almost like her own. But the walls were warped, the shadows too thick, the angles wrong. The boy stood beside the woman. He held her hand, but his eyes never left Claire. Behind them, the man towered. His face was pale, his jaw slack, as if he had forgotten how to hold it shut. He looked like he had drowned long ago. The woman spoke again. You brought the mirror back. You opened the door." Claire shook her head. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to." "You live where we died." The boy's voice broke through the others. Quiet, sharp. "You took our place." Claire backed into the hall. The mirror followed her, not physically, but in presence. The edges of its reflection seemed to bleed into the hallway walls, flickering with shadows that didn't belong there. She ran to her laptop, desperate for any clue. She typed in the address of the apartment building, page after page, digging past real estate listings and rental blogs. Then she found it, a local news article, 10 years old. Family found dead in bathroom, cause unknown, mirror missing. The photo was low resolution, but she recognized the hallway wallpaper, the door number, her apartment. The article mentioned gas leaks, but the coroner had found no signs of poisoning, no struggle. The family had simply stopped breathing, as if their hearts had given up all at once. And the mirror? It was gone when police arrived. A jagged square of discoloration. The article ended by noting that the unit had remained vacant for several years, until recently renovated. Claire felt sick. She shut the laptop. The bathroom was silent now. The mirror no longer hummed. But in the stillness, she heard something new. A quiet drip. Then another. Water. She followed the sound, not to the bathroom, to her bedroom. She opened the door slowly. The room was dark, but the ceiling light snapped on as she entered. The smell hit her first. Damp wood, rot, something long sealed away. There, above her dresser, hung another mirror. She had never put one there. Her breath caught. It was identical to the one in the bathroom. Same shape, same cracks, same faint shimmer across the glass, like something pulsed just behind the surface. She stepped closer and saw herself. Except not. The Claire in the mirror was crying. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her lips mouthed words, but no sound came. Her eyes were wide with terror, locked directly on her. Claire reached up to touch her face. Dry. The mirror version continued crying. Then someone stepped into view behind Mirror Claire. A figure in black, face hidden in shadow. It raised one pale, skeletal hand and placed it on her shoulder. Claire turned to look behind her. No one there. When she turned back, the mirror was empty. No reflection at all, just her room, but wrong. The bed was unmade, the walls cracked, a stain on the ceiling pulsed like a heartbeat. She heard it again, that same child's voice, but this time it came from behind her closet door. "We never left." A thud, louder now. The closet door shook. Claire backed away, eyes wide, chest heaving. A second thud, then a scraping noise. The door opened, just a crack. Darkness bled out from within. A slow, oozing shadow that slithered across the floor like spilled ink. Something moved in there, not walking, crawling. The voice came again. "You opened the mirror!" Claire screamed. The light bulb above her shattered, plunging the room into darkness. And from that closet, something began to crawl toward her. Claire's scream was swallowed by the dark. The shadow, crawling from the closet, dragged itself forward slowly, limbs clicking across the floor like bone tapping tile. Each sound was deliberate. Each pause between movements was a breath held far too long. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her flashlight had fallen when she screamed, rolling into a corner where it cast long, shifting beams across the walls. In one of those beams, the shape became clear for just a second. It was the boy, but he wasn't right. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, neck bent as though someone had tried to twist it off, but stopped halfway. His mouth was open, just a thin slit across the lower half of his pale face. No lips, no teeth, just blackness inside. He wasn't walking. He was pulling himself on all fours. Fingers long, knuckles scraped raw. Claire forced her legs to work. She turned, ran through the bedroom door, slammed it behind her, and wedged a chair beneath the knob. A useless gesture, but it made her feel like she had done something. Her hands shook so badly she almost couldn't grab her phone. She pressed it to her ear before even unlocking the screen, heart thudding. There was no dial tone, no sound at all. The line was open, but dead. Just faint static, like wind whispering across old vinyl. Then, faintly, she heard a voice through the receiver. "Come back, Claire." She dropped the phone. A knock came from the front door. Not the bedroom, not the bathroom, the front. Claire blinked at it. She hadn't heard anyone on the stairs. No one had buzzed in from the gate. But someone, something, was outside. She approached slowly. 3 soft knocks, then silence. She peered through the peephole. A man stood there, tall, gaunt, dressed in what looked like a janitor's uniform, faded navy blue with a patch on the chest. His hands were pressed flat against the door, as if he could feel her standing behind it. His head lifted slightly, and she saw his eyes. They weren't focused. They were wide and milky, staring through her as though the wood and metal of the door didn't exist at all. Then he smiled. It was too wide, too sharp, like his skin had been peeled back and stretched into place. Claire stepped away. He knocked again, this time harder, urgently. Thud, thud, thud. "Claire, let us in." The voice didn't come from behind the door. It came from behind her. She spun, but the hallway was empty. Then the bathroom door creaked open again. Even though she had never unblocked it, she didn't look inside. She didn't have to. She knew they were all waiting. The boy, the mother with the bleeding eyes, the father who never blinked, the baby that never cried. They were always waiting. She ran, out the front door, down the stairs, out into the cold night. She didn't grab her coat, didn't lock the door behind her. The outside air hit her like a slap, sharp and wet. It had rained. The street glistened beneath the streetlights, puddles rippling with something more than water. She reached the sidewalk and stopped. The fog was back. Not as thick as before, but enough, slashing. Shapes moved within it, slow, deliberate, like figures behind frosted glass, walking the edge of being seen. Claire turned left. She needed to go anywhere, anywhere but home. She made it 5 steps before realizing the street was wrong. The buildings were familiar, but distorted. Signs were in the wrong place. Windows were bricked up that hadn't been yesterday. A lamppost flickered with a rhythm like breathing, and the sound the sound in the fog. Footsteps that didn't belong to her, a child's laugh, broken, stuttering, played on loop. She looked behind her. No one there. But when she looked ahead again, the family stood in the middle of the sidewalk. Not spectral, not ghostly, just there. The boy held a small stuffed animal by one arm, a rabbit, damp and eyeless. The mother was barefoot, her feet stained dark with something that trailed behind them. The father stood with his arms hanging loose at his sides, fingers twitching. Claire stepped back. They didn't move. She turned, ran in the other direction. The fog swallowed her. The streets bent into shapes they weren't meant to take. Corners turned into loops. She passed the same mailbox 3 times. Each time, the letters carved into the mail grew deeper. The 3rd time they read, "You can't leave." She screamed again, this time not in terror, in fury. "What do you want? I'm not going in there." But her feet betrayed her. They moved, slow, reluctant, yet steady. The porch creaked beneath her weight. The door opened on its own. The inside was dark, smelled of rot and dust and something older. The family disappeared. The door shut behind her with a thunderous clap. She was inside, and in the foyer, hanging on the far wall, was the mirror. Only this time, it wasn't cracked, it was whole, and in it, she saw not herself, but them all. Dozens, hundreds, families, children, people with hollow eyes and mouths too wide, all staring. And in the center, her reflection slowly began to smile. Claire stood frozen in front of the mirror. It loomed over her, impossibly large now, spanning from floor to ceiling, edge to edge. No frame, just glass, but glass that didn't reflect. It remembered. Behind her reflection, the hallway stretched into blackness, and within that blackness stood figures, watching, silent, countless. Their eyes shimmered like wet stones, catching the dim, pulsing glow that leaked from unseen cracks in the ceiling above. Her own reflection was smiling, wide, unnatural. Claire wasn't smiling. Her body felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened around her, pressing inward. She wanted to move, wanted to run, but her legs remained locked beneath her. The house behind her creaked, not just with age, but with purpose, as though the walls themselves adjusted, breathing her in. A soft click sounded behind her. Footsteps, bare. Claire's mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't dare. The mirror flickered. Her reflection blinked, just once, but not in sync with her. Then it moved its lips. "Don't turn around." The words didn't come from the mirror. They slid across the floor, whispered from nowhere, from everywhere. Another step behind her, wet, slow, plap. The sound of bare skin against damp wood. Claire's hands curled into fists. The voice returned. A woman's voice, soft, motherly. "We told you not to bring it back." Claire didn't answer. Couldn't. The reflection still stared, but now it shifted. The face on the glass was peeling, the smile widening, splitting across the cheeks like paper torn too fast. Eyes dimmed into hollows. The mouth whispered again. "You shouldn't have looked." A breath brushed the back of Claire's neck. She flinched, barely suppressing a scream. The breath was cold, but somehow wet. Like something with lungs full of stagnant water had just exhaled against her skin. She clamped her eyes shut, trembling. "What do you want from me?" A hand touched her shoulder. Not a grasp, a presence. It didn't squeeze, it rested. But it was enough. She turned. The hallway was empty. No one stood behind her. The hand was gone. But the mirror had changed. Now the image showed a different version of her apartment. Not old, not decrepit, but rotting. Mold crept up the wallpaper. Furniture warped. A trail of muddy footprints led from the front door to the bathroom. And inside the bathroom, the boy stood, facing the wall. He turned slowly, as though he had sensed her watching. His eyes met hers through the glass. "Claire," he whispered, lips barely moving. "Don't turn around next time. Stop." Then he lifted one hand, pointed to the side, to her right, where another mirror had appeared. She hadn't seen it before, hadn't heard it arrive, but it stood against the wall now, tall, thin, a dressing mirror, antique and cracked down the center. She didn't want to look, but her body moved without asking. The second mirror didn't show a room. It showed a stairwell, familiar. It was the stairwell of her apartment building, and someone was walking down it, step by step, wearing her coat, dragging her suitcase, face hidden by shadows. Claire stepped forward, breath shallow. The figure in the mirror reached the first floor and opened a door marked Exit. The word flickered, like neon from a dream. The figure turned toward the mirror. It was her, but not her. The woman in the reflection was too perfect. Hair smooth, eyes clear, lips curved in a soft smile that held no warmth. Claire took another step closer. The woman in the mirror raised a finger, placed it to her lips. Shh! Then she turned and walked into the fog. Claire's vision swam. The lights above her buzzed, then dimmed. She stumbled back into the first room, where the large mirror still stretched across the wall. The figures behind her reflection had pressed closer. Now, dozens of faces stared out, their expressions blank, but their eyes wet with something like sorrow. Claire spun, and again, no one was there. The floor groaned under her weight. The air shifted. From the far end of the hall, the door creaked open. It was the bathroom door. She hadn't seen it in this house until now. She took a step forward, then another, drawn. The bathroom beyond looked exactly like hers, tiled, pale, small. Except the mirror above the sink was missing, a void in the wall, like a mouth waiting to be fed. She crossed the threshold. The door slammed shut behind her, and the light died. Everything went black. Claire's breath echoed too loudly in the tiny space. She reached out, fingers brushing the sink. The porcelain was warm, slick, like skin. Then something whispered in her ear. "We were here before you." A second voice joined. "You took our place." Then a third. You brought the mirrors. A fourth. You let them see again. Claire turned to leave, but the door was gone. Just a blank wall where it had been. She screamed, but the sound went nowhere. It was swallowed whole. The boy was watching. So close now, close enough to breathe, and he smiled. Claire could no longer tell how much time had passed. The house had no windows, no clocks, only the steady rhythmic creaking of unseen floorboards and the faint pulse of something living inside the walls. Her reflection had vanished from the tall mirror. It had been replaced by something else, a room full of children, still, silent, facing away from her. They stood in neat rows, backs turned, heads slightly tilted down. Their arms hung at their sides, limp. Their skin was pale, almost bluish, and none of them moved, not even to breathe. Claire pressed her hand against the surface of the mirror. It was warm, too warm, and soft. Like skin pulled taut over something deeper. The children in the reflection shifted, only a little, only enough to let her know they were aware of her. Then one of them, a girl in a faded red dress with torn lace at the collar, slowly turned her head. Her face was gaunt, lips gray, eyes huge and glassy like marble soaked in milk. Her mouth parted slightly. Claire leaned closer. The girl's jaw opened wider, wider. Then the others began to turn, one by one. No sudden movements, no sound. Just a slow, inevitable rotation of their heads until dozens of eyeless stares met hers, and they began to whisper. No mouths moved, but Claire heard it. Soft and rhythmic, layered like waves crashing in reverse. She stumbled back from the mirror. Her foot hit something. She turned quickly. There was nothing. But when she looked back, the mirror was gone. In its place was a wooden door, heavy, old, cracked in several places. At its center was a child's handprint, pressed deep into the grain, dark red as though burned there. From behind it, a slow tap, tap, tap began. Claire didn't want to open it. She didn't want to know. But her hand lifted on its own. The doorknob was ice cold. The wood beneath it pulsed. She turned it. The door creaked open into a nursery. Dust coated every surface. Broken toys lay in pieces on the floor. A mobile spun lazily above a shattered crib, the figures hanging from it mangled. Birds with too many wings, stars with jagged smiles carved into them. The children stood around the edges of the room, silent, motionless, watching her. Claire stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind her. No lock, no handle. She turned slowly. The children hadn't moved. But now one of them, a small boy with no eyes, just empty sockets that leaked dark water, raised his hand and pointed to the crib. Claire walked toward it. Inside lay a mirror, small, oval, framed in tarnished silver. Its surface was cracked, but not shattered. She picked it up. The room behind her reflected clearly, and every child was now looking at her through the glass. Their mouths stretched wide, too wide. Black liquid spilled from their lips like ink. They began to chant. a word she couldn't understand. Not in English, not in any language she knew, but it pressed into her skull like a drill, vibrating through her teeth, behind her eyes. The mirror in her hands burned hot. She dropped it. It didn't shatter. Instead, it rippled, as though it had become water. From the center of the glass, a face emerged, a child's, but wrong. Its features were smeared, eyes too far apart, nose slanted, a mouth that opened sideways across the cheek. It looked at her, then smiled, and the children around her whispered in unison, "He sees you." Claire backed toward the wall. Her fingers touched something soft. She turned. A child was standing behind her, closer than the others. She didn't recognize this one. A girl with no mouth. Her lower face was smooth skin, untouched. She reached out and took Claire's hand. Her skin was cold, but not dead. She pressed Claire's fingers to the mirror on the floor. Claire tried to pull away. Couldn't. Her fingers sank into the glass like it was tar. Then, with a sudden pull, she was yanked forward, face slamming into the surface, a burst of blackness flooding her vision. She screamed, but no sound came. The world twisted, shifted, collapsed inward. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing in her apartment. Not the house, not the nursery, just her living room. Morning light poured through the blinds. Birds chirped faintly outside. Everything looked normal. She blinked. Her phone was on the coffee table, buzzing. She picked it up. It was a message. Unknown number. They saw you. You shouldn't have let them watch. ... She turned to the hallway. The bathroom door was open. Inside, the mirror was gone. But on the wall where it had been, dozens of handprints stained the tile. All child-sized, all facing inward, as though something had been trying to climb out. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the handprints smeared across the bathroom tiles. They were everywhere. The mirror wall, the ceiling above the sink, even across the shower curtain, which now hung damp and slightly parted. The marks were brownish red, crusted and thick, like they had been made long ago. But they were still wet to the touch. She didn't want to move closer, but her feet obeyed something else. The moment she stepped across the threshold, the light above her fizzled. The bulb didn't go out, not completely, but began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster. With each pulse, the steam grew heavier in the room, though no water was running. The air thickened until it felt like she was breathing through cloth. She wiped her palm across the tiles, smearing the smallest print. A whisper echoed from the walls. "Why did you erase me?" Claire spun. The room was empty. She wasn't even sure if the voice had come from outside her own skull. More steam drifted in, curling from the edges of the bathtub drain. Thick. White tendrils that seemed to carry whispers inside them. Overlapping voices, layered like a choir behind a closed door. She leaned closer. The voices grew louder, but they weren't speaking to her. They were arguing, not with words she could understand, but the emotion behind them was clear. Anger, panic, betrayal. Some voices high-pitched, cracking, others deep and guttural. One of them, a woman's, wept through broken gasps. Another, a man's, chanted something low and steady, like a prayer. Then a child screamed, not with fear, with rage. The sound was muffled, like coming through thick fog. Claire stumbled back and nearly slipped on the slick tiles. Her hand caught the edge of the sink, and she steadied herself. The mirror was gone, but her own reflection shimmered faintly on the wet tiles. And behind her, in that reflection, a shape moved. She turned. Nothing. She looked back. The shape was closer now, just the outline of a figure, dripping wet, standing in the center of the bathroom. Claire took one step back, and the door behind her slammed shut. The room plunged into darkness. Then the water started. The shower turned on by itself, cold water blasting against the curtain, causing it to balloon outward. A sound followed, something moving behind it. Claire pressed herself against the wall. The curtain swayed. One slow second passed. Then another. A breathy rasp came from behind it. Then a hand reached out, pulling the curtain aside, but there was no one there. Only steam, only sound. A voice echoed through the room, clear, hollow. "Don't forget us." She turned and yanked the bathroom door open. A hallway was lit again, as though nothing had happened. Her ears were ringing, her breath shallow. The steam didn't follow her out, but the scent did. Mildew and rot, like water that had been sitting for years. She ran to the kitchen and opened every window, trying to fill her lungs with anything else. Outside, the street was still and gray. Clouds hung low, pressing down like a lid. She stared at the world beyond the glass, and for the first time, it didn't feel real. It felt painted or remembered, like she had stepped into someone else's memory of her life. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Stop listening. The more you hear, the closer they get." Claire dropped the phone on the counter. The faucet in the kitchen sink turned itself on. Just a slow, steady trickle of cold water. She turned it off. It clicked back on again. Another whisper leaked out from the drain. "Help us come through." She grabbed her coat and keys and left the apartment. Outside, the wind felt wrong, like it blew in every direction at once. Her neighbors' windows were shuttered. No one walked the sidewalks. The sky had no birds, no planes, not even clouds. Just a blank white dome. She walked fast, past the corner store, past the cafe where she used to get her morning coffee. Everything looked the same, but felt wrong. The doors were closed. Lights on, but no movement inside. Even the air smelled sterile, like a stage set. She reached the edge of the block. The fog was back. It waited at the end of the street like a wall, dense and low. A breeze stirred it, revealing something faint beyond the veil. A door, standing upright in the middle of the intersection. Wooden, warped, unattached to anything. The same door she'd had seen in the mirror. She turned back and saw them, the children, lined up across the sidewalk behind her. Not running, just standing, silent. All of them soaking wet, water dripping from their hair, clothes clinging to thin limbs, their eyes locked on hers. Then one of them whispered, "You opened it. Now it stays open." Claire backed away, her steps slow, careful. She turned to run. The fog swallowed her whole, and somewhere inside it, the voices began to sing. Not words, just sound. A lullaby that had been played too many times, the melody twisted and warped. Claire stopped running. The door was in front of her now. She hadn't walked toward it. It had come to her. Her hand reached out. The knob was slick with something warm. The voices whispered one last time, "Come see what you've remembered." She opened the door and stepped inside. The door closed behind Claire with a deep, bone-hollow thud. Darkness swallowed her. Not the kind of dark found at midnight, not the kind that holds the comfort of stars, but a suffocating, smothering blackness that pressed against her eyes, mouth, lungs. She reached out in front of her, but touched nothing. No walls, no floor. It was as if the world had been erased. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice failed. Her breath came out soundless. The air felt thick, filled with something dry and brittle, like ashes drifting through a void. Then, light, a faint pulse. It glowed red somewhere ahead of her, dim at first, then stronger, flickering like a dying heartbeat. She followed it step by step. Her bare feet made no sound, but she felt something shift under her soles. Not tile, not wood, a layer of broken glass, countless shards. Each step sliced shallow cuts across her skin. She didn't stop. The red glow grew. Eventually, it revealed a corridor, narrow, cracked. Its walls pulsed faintly, like something behind them was breathing, slow and rhythmic. The air reeked of mold and charred paper. On each wall hung mirrors, dozens, mismatched in shape and age. Some were fogged over, others were shattered. A few shimmered with scenes that made her stomach twist. In one, she saw herself sleeping. In another, she saw her apartment's front door slowly creaking open. In a third, she saw the boy again, standing in the kitchen, eating something red from the sink. Then, from the far end of the corridor came the sound, a scream. Not loud, not human. It was the scream of silence breaking, of something ancient being forced through the thin veil of reality. It dragged across the hall like nails down steel, vibrating the mirrors so violently that several cracked at once. Claire dropped to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. The sound grew, a rising screech that twisted into whispered words. "We were shattered to be seen." She looked up. One of the mirrors ahead had changed. It no longer showed her reflection. It showed a room she recognized. Her childhood bedroom. Pink wallpaper. The same stuffed bear in the corner. The same creaking ceiling fan that had spun slow and steady during endless nights. And in the center of the bed, a girl, young, 8, maybe 9, eyes closed, face peaceful. Claire gasped. It was her, but not asleep, lying there with her eyes sewn shut, skin pale, hands crossed over her chest, like she had been prepared for burial. The ceiling fan above the bed began to spin faster in the reflection, faster still. until the blades became a blur. The girl's mouth opened and screamed. Claire stumbled back as the mirror shattered outward, the shards slicing across her cheek, her arms. The scream carried with them, echoing down the corridor in endless waves. Then all the other mirrors followed, one by one, exploding outward, hurling memories and voices and shadows across the space. From the shards came the figures, crawling, pulling themselves forward. Children without faces, women with sewn lips, men with no eyes. They slithered out of the broken glass like insects emerging from old skin, bodies bending wrong, too many joints, too many teeth. They didn't mush her, they simply watched. From behind cracked mirror frames, their mouths moved together. You looked too long. Claire ran. The corridor twisted beneath her, spiraling into a slope. The walls bent with it, warping like rubber. Mirrors cracked underfoot. The voices followed her, chanted in loops, repeating memories she didn't know she had. Why did you come back? Why didn't you listen? She left the door open. She is the door. The slope ended at a room, a circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, and on that pedestal, the first mirror, the oval one, silver frame, untouched. Its surface shimmered. Claire approached slowly. The figures did not follow her in. They stood at the edge of the chamber, their whispers dying, their mouths still. She reached out, touched the glass. This time it didn't burn. It invited. The surface pulled her in. Her skin passed through it like mist. Her bones followed. Her breath dissolved. She fell. But not downward. She fell backward. Through time. Through space. Through her own reflection. And when she opened her eyes, she was standing in her bathroom again. Morning light through the blinds. A single drip from the tap. No steam, no voices. The mirror above the sink had returned, whole, clean. She leaned forward, her reflection blinked and smiled. But not her. It wasn't her face. It wore her skin. But the eyes belonged to something else. Behind her, the hallway light flickered. And from deep within the apartment, from beyond any room she remembered, came the sound of shattering glass. Again and again and again. The house was quiet again, too quiet. Claire stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her breath shallow, her skin clammy. The face staring back at her was hers, but only just. There was something beneath the surface of her reflection, something that shifted when she blinked, something that smiled when she didn't. She backed away from the sink, every step punctuated by the soft drip from the faucet. Drip, drip. Each sound echoed louder than it should have, like it was dripping into something deeper than porcelain, into a well that had no bottom. She had tried to leave earlier, had opened the front door and stepped into the hallway. But the hallway was gone. In its place had been fog, thick and soundless, the kind that eats footsteps and swallows thought. And when she turned back, the apartment door had vanished too. The knob, the hinges, the frame, all of it sealed behind new wallpaper, patterned in looping vines that writhed when she blinked too long. Now she was trapped, not in her apartment, in the house that remembered, that held things, that kept things. Claire moved through the rooms one by one. The kitchen light buzzed overhead. The bulb was new. She had replaced it herself the first night she moved in. Now it flickered like it was gasping for breath. The fridge door creaked open on its own. Inside, no food, no shelves, just a mirror set deep into the back wall, rimmed in frost. Claire slammed the door shut. She turned toward the hallway again. The walls had changed. Photographs hung there now, but not of her, of others, blurry figures, all staring into mirrors, all caught at the moment their reflection began to change. Children, elderly men, women holding infants that didn't reflect at all. At the end of the hall stood the boy. Silent, his head tilted slightly. The rabbit he always carried was now missing its ears. Its face was torn open, stuffing trailing like intestines. Claire stared at him. "I want to leave," she whispered. The boy blinked slowly. "You already did." "No, I'm still here." "You left yourself behind." He turned and walked through the wall. Not through a door, through the wall. His small soaked footprints remained on the hardwood floor. Claire followed, not because she wanted to, because there was nowhere else to go. She stepped through where the wall should have been, and into a memory, her own. It was her grandmother's house. The hallway smelled of mothballs and rosewater. Dust danced in the amber light. The floor creaked in the exact way she remembered. The old mirror still hung at the end of the hall, oval, ornate, silver-framed. She hadn't seen it since the funeral, since the night she'd stared too long into it and thought she saw someone watching from behind her shoulder. Claire stepped forward. The mirror shimmered. Inside, her grandmother sat on the bed, brushing her hair. Except it wasn't her. It looked like her, but the eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, too still. The figure turned, smiled, and in the mirror behind her, Claire saw herself as a child, hiding beneath the bed, watching something she couldn't now remember. The memory flickered. The hallway melted into another, back into the house, back into now. But the mirror was still there, only this time it was cracked. It hung suspended in the air with no wall behind it, just void. A slow breath echoed around her, not hers, low, wet. "Do you remember now?" the voice asked. Claire spun. The family stood before her, the mother with eyes that streamed endless tears, the father, his jaw dislocated, hanging loose, the baby, silent, swaddled in mold-dark cloth, and the boy, always the boy. They didn't move, just stared. Claire's voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" The boy stepped forward. "You heard us." "I didn't mean to." "You saw us." "I didn't know what I was seeing." "You remembered." Claire trembled. "I remember nothing." The boy raised a hand, pointed. "To forget is a choice." Behind her the mirror shattered, not outward, inward, into a hole, a swirling mouth of black glass and splintered time. From within it, the voices poured, the whispers, the chants, the broken lullabies. Claire felt herself being pulled toward it, not her body, herself. every memory, every fear, every echo. The mother stepped closer. Her hand reached out, brushing Claire's cheek. It was cold, not dead, just forgotten. "You lived where we died," she said softly. "You watched us fade." The father nodded once. The boy whispered, "You are part of the house now." Claire tried to scream, but the house didn't allow screams anymore. Only silence, only reflection, only memory. She looked into the shards of the broken mirror and saw herself on her couch, sleeping peacefully, her apartment clean. The light soft. Someone knocked at the door. Her reflection opened it. A woman stood on the threshold, eyes wide, keys in hand, and behind her, the mirror in the bathroom waited, still bare, still hungry. Claire smiled, not in the reflection, not in her body, in the house. Because the house never forgets, and the mirror always finds someone new.